In tonight's rewrite, Chapter 2 of a love letter. Last night, I introduced you to my beloved Frances Perkins, the first woman cabinet member, the woman who really did create Social Security as Franklin Roosevelt's Secretary of Labor, and then, of course, sat back and applauded President Roosevelt as he got all the public credit for creating Social Security. What Roosevelt really deserves credit for, huge credit, is having the vision and courage to choose Frances Perkins as his Secretary of Labor. No president has made a better or more important cabinet choice since, and no cabinet member in history has had such a lasting and important effect on the way we live in this country. I promised last night that I would try to do the impossible tonight and imagine what Frances Perkins would say about today's debate on Social Security, specifically the president's proposal to reduce the cost of living increase in Social Security benefits. Now, I'm fairly certain what Franklin Roosevelt would say. That's the easy part. But let's listen to more of what Roosevelt and Frances Perkins themselves had to say about Social Security to try to figure out what they'd say about it now. Here is FDR at the signing ceremony of the Social Security Act with Frances Perkins standing behind him.
This Social Security measure gives at least some protection to 50 million of our citizens who will reap direct benefits through unemployment compensation, through old age pensions, and through increased services for the protection of children and the prevention of ill health. We can never insure 100% of the population against 100% of the hazards and vicissitudes of life, but we have tried to frame a law which will give some measure of protection to the average citizen and to his family against the loss of a job and against poverty-stricken old age.
Notice the modesty of FDR's ambition for Social Security then. It was never his intention to deliver a comfortable living to retired people. He speaks of some protection. He says we can never insure 100% of the population against 100% of the hazards and vicissitudes of life. He was just trying to give people some measure, as he called it, some measure of protection against unemployment through the unemployment insurance that was originated in the Social Security Act, and some measure of protection against, quote, poverty-stricken old age. Something better than poverty. That's what Franklin Roosevelt was aiming for. There were no cost of living increases included in the original Social Security Act. Franklin Roosevelt and Frances Perkins never tried to insert cost of living increases into Social Security. When the law was passed, the highest concentration of poverty in America was among the elderly. And as an anti-poverty program, Social Security has worked. The good news is people over 65 are now the age group least likely to be poverty-stricken, and the very bad news is children are now the most likely to be poverty-stricken. President Roosevelt and Frances Perkins knew Social Security would change over time, and they knew it would have to be changed. At first, all government workers were not included in the Social Security system. They didn't pay Social Security taxes. They didn't collect Social Security benefits. In fact, only 56% of the workforce was covered by the original Social Security Act. Self-employed workers did not begin to be included until the 1950s. Increases in benefits by the Congress were made occasionally, but no automatic cost of living increases were in the law until 1972. And in a speech in 1962, Frances Perkins looked back on how Social Security evolved in the real world.
Thousands and thousands of problems arose in the administration which had not been foreseen by those who did the planning and the legal drafting. And of course the bill had to be amended and has been amended and amended and amended and amended until it's now grown into a large and important project for which I think the people of the United States are deeply thankful.
Obviously, there would be absolutely nothing surprising to Francis Perkins or Franklin Roosevelt about a president thinking about changing the benefits calculation formula, something that has been changed many, many times over the years. There were two principles that were of the utmost importance to both Franklin Roosevelt and Francis Perkins in the design of Social Security and in the contemplation of any changes to Social Security. The first was that Social Security must be self-financing, that the Social Security tax on your paycheck go directly and exclusively to paying Social Security benefits. The second is that the benefit paid to a worker is based on what the worker has paid into the system. Franklin Roosevelt said in a private meeting, "We put those payroll contributions there so as to give the contributors a legal, moral, and political right to collect their pensions and their unemployment benefits. With those taxes in there, no damn politician can ever scrap my Social Security program." Franklin Roosevelt thought that the only thing that gave you a right, a political right as well as a moral right to collect Social Security payments was paying into Social Security. He didn't want it to be a welfare program. He did not want workers getting something for nothing under Social Security. It's not that Franklin Roosevelt was completely opposed to welfare. In fact, he, which is to say Francis Perkins, created welfare within the Social Security Act. But the welfare provision was to be used exclusively by women, mothers of dependent children. Franklin Roosevelt hated the idea of men collecting welfare, of being on the dole, as they would call it in those days. Francis Perkins knew that poverty was blind to gender and may herself have been inclined to be more generous with welfare payments, but she knew she needed to design a Social Security system that was a true insurance system, that participants got what they paid for and no one got something for nothing. No one could call Social Security being on the dole.
Franklin Roosevelt was greatly, very much opposed to the dole. Oh, we don't want the dole, not the dole. I had a great time to get him quieted down and stop talking about the dole and to try to think about the realities.
The Perkins-Roosevelt principles on Social Security have never been violated by any of the changes made to Social Security so far. You heard Francis Perkins say that the Social Security Act would have to be amended and amended and amended and amended over time because she knew that the Social Security tax was going to have to go up if Social Security benefits were going to be self-funded. If we were going to use other tax revenue to pay for Social Security, then we wouldn't have had to increase the Social Security taxes, but using other tax revenue to pay for Social Security would violate the Perkins-Roosevelt principle on funding Social Security. It would break that direct relationship between what workers pay into Social Security directly and what they get back directly from Social Security. Now, I'm sure Francis Perkins and probably Franklin Roosevelt would have approved of the 1972 amendments that established automatic cost of living increases for Social Security benefits. And I'm sure they also would have approved of the Social Security amendments just 5 years later that cut those increases in Social Security benefits. That's right. In 1977, a Democratic House of Representatives and a Democratic Senate and a Democratic President all supported cutting Social Security benefits after they discovered that the first formula they used for automatic cost of living increases was increasing Social Security benefits at a much faster rate than the system was able to pay. And so let me say this again. A Democratic president, Jimmy Carter, and a Democratic House of Representatives and a Democratic Senate voted to cut the annual increase in Social Security benefits because they believed it was a necessary and prudent thing to do for the continued solvency of Social Security. There is nothing new in that idea. And when you hear people saying that no Democratic president has ever contemplated such a thing before, you are not hearing the truth. And in 1983, a Democratic House of Representatives led by Tip O'Neill, a protector of Social Security, voted to raise the retirement age for Social Security for full retirement benefits under Social Security. A Republican-controlled Senate also voted to raise the retirement age, with a majority of the Democrats in the Senate voting to raise that retirement age. What is now the great taboo in the Democratic Party, raising the retirement age, is something the Democratic Party has already done. They did raise the retirement age. And they didn't do it to be mean. They did it to preserve the long-term solvency of Social Security as a self-financing system, according to those Perkins Roosevelt principles. Now, I was there on the Senate floor the night the Democrats, and Democrats alone, passed Bill Clinton's idea of increasing taxation on the Social Security benefits of people whose incomes were greater than $34,000. That was a Social Security benefit cut for people making more than $34,000. Congress and the president did that for the same reason that all of these changes have been made. Now, I have absolutely no doubt tonight that Franklin Roosevelt would support President Obama's proposed reduction of 0.3% in the annual increase in Social Security retirement benefits if it was part of an overall package agreeable to Democrats, including taxation and the other elements that the president insists on. Roosevelt would think it perfectly reasonable to slightly reduce the annual increase in order to extend the solvency of the program. He would also absolutely be opposed to simply removing the limit on Social Security taxation so that the rich would pour much more money into funding Social Security, because then workers, especially the highest earning workers, would not be getting a payment based on what they paid in, and the top earning workers would actually get back much, much less than they paid in, as some of the top earning workers already do in this country. It's one of the great secrets of Social Security. But at the top end of the contributors to Social Security, many of them are now getting back less than what they actually paid into the system. That would shock Franklin Roosevelt. It would violate Roosevelt's notion of the legal, moral, and political right to collect pensions based on what you pay into the pension fund. Now, I think Frances Perkins would take a broader view of this whole subject. And while looking at Social Security retirement benefits, she would notice today that we have many other ways the federal government subsidizes retirement in this country that did not used to exist, including very big tax breaks that the rich get and others get for self-funding their own personal retirement funds, IRAs, Keogh plans, all these sorts of things. And I think what Frances Perkins would have to say about the current debate is more complex and more comprehensive than what anyone else is currently saying about Social Security. And to lay that out, I think it's going to take a lot more time than what I have here tonight. And so I will do that in our next chapter of Frances Perkins, the American Hero.